Good morning, everybody out there. Good morning, Dwayne. How are you?
I am good. Good morning to you as well.
Oh, I'm so excited to have you here with us today for this special Facebook Live event. We have a big topic ahead of us.
Yeah,
But you're an expert in this.
I'm trying to do better each and every day. Let's go with that.
Oh, well, Dwayne, tell us a little bit about kind of where you're at. Obviously, I'm seeing the arch in your picture behind you. You are not here in Columbia, Missouri. Where is home for you?
Home for me is St. Louis County.
Oh,
So I am the County Engagement Specialist for University of Missouri Extension in St. Louis County. And then I'm also the chair for the Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Council for MU Extension.
okay. And now how long, again, we both work under the University of Missouri Extension. I've been here just a little over 3 years. You have been here how long now?
It'll be 6 years next week.
Okay.
6 years. Before that, I was in engineering. So I did a complete shift from engineering, corporate world to MU Extension community education. So it's been a great ride.
Excellent. Yeah, that sounds like a very unique transition. But I know that this topic we're here for today, that you are this is near and dear to a lot of us, and I think that it's something that a lot of workplaces need to be cognizant of. Tell me a little bit about why you decided to transition into taking trainings in implicit bias and serving on the boards that you're serving on for diversity, inclusion, and equity. What got you to that space?
A great question. So diversity is, of course, very important to me. Cultural awareness is very important to me. The way that our region, our state, our world is moving, the conversations are happening. And I just wanted to, become better aware of how I can be a better person in diversity, in cultural awareness, in implicit biases, in stereotyping, and what does it actually mean for me, instead of hearing something that I didn't completely understand or seeing the headlines. Let me go ahead and do the work to see exactly how I can better educate myself, for one, and then see how the environment that I am in, either with my family or my community or my workplace, how I can support the growth as well through EDI work. And what I found was it's easy to teach. It's easy to find something on Google and go out and do it, or go through some trainings and just sit back and say, all right, I did that. The harder part is actually doing the work. The harder part is actually being a better person now that you actually understand the information. So it's been a journey. I would say that I've understood diversity and understood culture to some degree based off of my background in history and family upbringing. But the work that has actually been happening for me personally the last 3 or 4 years, exponential. It's been a roller coaster of a ride, the highs and the greatness. And then it's just like, oh, the reflections and trying to figure out why I'm feeling this way or why I'm acting a certain way. So it's been great. It's been wonderful. And I'm just happy to continue to have the conversation.
Yes, yes. And I love that. I love that you are saying, instead of just reading one article on this or saying, okay, I'm going to learn a little bit about it, but actually applying what it is that you're learning on a day-to-day basis. And that's not easy, right? The behavioral change behind anything new, not easy. And this one certainly brings up a lot of feels, right? When we think
Right.
about implicit bias, someone telling us that we have a bias. Tell me a little bit about that in your experience.
So I've heard the word bias, and I've always heard it negatively, like, oh, your bias is this, or your bias is that, or you're biased. And I'm just like, no, I'm not. I get defensive, and it's just like, no, I'm not biased. Why are you saying that to me? But going in and doing the research and understanding that we all have biases. They're natural to us. It's the way that our brain actually operates. Our brain actually has to operate that way. Someone easily explained it to me that if you see a lion coming to you, your bias is that this lion is going to attack me, so I'm going to flee. That is a bias. That is based off of what you know, what you've heard, what you have seen. And so that's a bias. So we all have them. The work is now that we know that we actually have them, now we know that our brain is basically processing information in that way. Is it helpful to us? Is it hurtful to us? Is it hurtful for the person that we're working with? What does that actually mean? And how do we do the work as we're interpreting the information, even if it's quick? How do we do the work after that fact to see exactly, was that the right situation? Was that the right bias? Do I need to understand more before I, get in that situation again, so I can react a little bit differently? So what does that actually look like?
Absolutely. And I actually read an article, watched a video one time that actually said research suggests that our brain processes 11 million pieces of information every second. Yes. But we can only actively process 40 of them. My mind was blown, Dwayne.
Yeah, that was my list and you had it. So that is absolutely correct. Our brain has to do that. So as we're having this conversation, our brain is still reacting to all of this other things. And how do we actually work through that? So I love that I have a brain that way. I love that we have that science and that, the math part of me and the science part of me is loving that. The education part of me is just like, all right, let's continue to share that and continue how that's actually useful in that regard. So
absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that's when we talk about the feels and the emotions that this topic can bring up is for me, at least, it was helpful to just pause and to think, okay, well, this does make sense now. We have the conscious brain, which is only processing about 40 of those things per second. And we have that unconscious brain that's processing the rest of it. And it has to be based off of what we've experienced, what we know, what our beliefs are, what our values are, all of that, our experiences. And so that was an easier, I guess, bite for me, to take, was to recognize that you're right. Bias does not need to have a negative connotation to it. It's natural in some way, shape, or form.
And I appreciate you saying like our lived experience and what we actually know. And so, yes, understanding that our biases are shaped off of how we grew up, what was told to us as we were growing up, what those experiences were, how we actually reacted or others reacted to those situations, what our educational system was like, either formally or informally. That's all shaping our story. And our story is basically shaping our biases. What the hard part for me was, and I'm not going to speak in we, the hard part for me was to understand that that was my story, and story isn't always fact. And so my parents, wonderful. My educational system is great. All of that is terrific. And understanding that that is still a limited viewpoint of the entire world. And so how do I understand that that is great? That is wonderful. I live in that and I work in that, but understanding that that is still putting blinders on of all the other stuff that I haven't experienced or I do not know. Right. So it's not wrong. It's just, let me open it up a little bit more and experience a little bit more. So my biases are viewed based off of a broader audience, a bigger spectrum. And it's easy for me. It was easy for me to basically become defensive, because if you're saying that I have biases, then you're telling me that my parents were wrong or my educational system is wrong or I did something wrong or all of that. And it's just like, no, I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that you're wrong. I'm just saying, let's open it up and give you a different point of view to see if your story is still the same based off of this new information and this new knowledge.
That is a great way to put it, Dwayne. Thank you for that. When you consider that element of story, right? Our story, and we all have these personal, individualized stories our whole life. Yeah. I can think back to, I used to be a deputy juvenile officer, and I was very young, and I hadn't had any training in this area, and I knew what I knew, right? And I'm going out to some of these houses, which we were doing different types of investigations. And I remember on several occasions telling some of the children's division folks, like, we have to get these kids out of here. This doesn't seem safe. This doesn't seem right. And I had one time, and I am so thankful that I did. I had a children's division worker look at me, and she said, "Who are you to say that that's not right? Who are you?" She goes, for that child, that is normal. And for that parent, that is normal. And it was really a humbling experience. And I think I'm, again, so grateful that I had it, but that shaped the way I kind of moved forward in my general interest in this particular topic. So
that's a great share. And it just makes me think of so many other examples from my own life. Like I just saw a Glass Castle last night on TV, and it talked about their home situation and how people were coming in and trying to say that their situation wasn't great, and they came out and said it was the best situation for them, of course, to the movie. I grew up with two parents at home and eating dinner and going on trips, and I was just like, that was the norm. That's to me. If you did not have that experience, then oh my goodness. And I had to interact with youth that basically educated me very well to say that you're coming in thinking that you're better than me because of your home bringing. And who are you if you have not basically been in my environment to say that yours is better than mine?
yeah.
And I'm like, it was hard for me to be, because I was like, I'm the adult. Don't you listen to me. And so it was a great experience. And I'm glad that I was able to have that reflection. And I was happy that people trusted me to have a conversation in that. And so with biases and how we're actually working and interacting, I think it's about a conversation. It's about a discussion. It is about, let's just go ahead, since we all have them, let's just put it all on the table. Let's just share it. Because to me, the hindrance and the issues is when we're living in that and we're not communicating why we're living in or how we're living in that. And so just your share is like providing me, opening up my viewpoint a little bit more, just because there's an experience that I wasn't familiar with. So.
Absolutely. And I think that it requires that element of being willing to truly listen to understand somebody else. You know, I think we're very quick as human beings to listen, to respond, you know, listen to tell somebody when they're wrong. And simply, I mean, this isn't going to work if that is why we go into these conversations.
You're just hitting on so many good points, because I can be very short in delivery at times. And that didn't open up that conversation to actually explore and learn. So like I said, these last 3 and 4 years have been a journey, because I've actually had to understand how my biases affected how I worked with people and what that actually looked like, how their biases affected how they interacted with me and what did that actually look like, how I work with customers, how I go into a room, how I present myself, even to the point of how do I dress, because someone's bias can look at me and be like, all right, he doesn't have on a tie, he doesn't have on a jacket. Is he really the person to basically be speaking on here? Or, oh, I react to him because he's not in a tie and in a jacket and everything like that. So all of those biases, and I'm like, I look at people and have that same interaction. It's like, all right, based off of how they're looking, where they're positioned, what their background looks like, all of that feeds into my head, and I can easily make a judgment about that person very, very quickly.
Yes.
And if I don't do the work to basically, why am I judging this person so quickly? And it reminds me of people like, oh, you remind me of someone, and I'm gonna say, oh, I didn't like that person, so now I don't like you.
Right.
When that's not right. That is not right at all.
Yes. Yeah. And it's interesting, you know, and again, I just rounding back to what we started out talking about there, understanding that this is happening, and it is almost comical in some ways that we think we can avoid doing this without putting in some intentionality, because that computer program, that unconscious mind, is constantly running. And I just finished a supervisory certificate series, and some of the folks in there, we talk a lot about assumptions, challenging assumptions in that program. And I had 2 folks I knew. Here's what LinkedIn does, is let you know when somebody looks at your profile. And I knew 2 of the folks from my training session had looked at my profile. So I just said, tell me, what were some of your initial assumptions that you made, you know, when you looked at that profile? Because we all do it, and it's okay. We just have to recognize, how is that affecting the way we are interacting with that person? And so, Dwayne, I want to pause for just a quick second. I want to see if we have any comments. We have a great group of folks on today, and I'm looking here. Ray Lyon is actually on as our moderator in our comment section. So it looks like we have Sarah's checked in with us. We have Nancy checked in with us. Thank you guys. Ray's talking about how self-awareness is the key to changing our biases. We're going to talk a little bit more about that here in a minute, Dwayne. I think, oh, I'm seeing some other comments. Thank you guys. If you have questions, Jelane's on with us as well. Laura's on with us. Thank you all. If you have questions about this, I'm seeing some folks that some of the statements we've already said, Dwayne, are resonating with them. You know, that 11 million pieces of information per second resonates with people. And I want to know from you guys, how have you seen this play out in your own world? You know, I shared an experience with you. Dwayne shared an experience with you. But what does this look like in your life? You know, and I want to transition because this is not just a day-to-day thing, like in our everyday lives, but we see this in the workplace as well.
Right.
Dwayne, can you give us some examples as we're waiting for some of those comments to come in on maybe how we see implicit bias playing out in the workplace?
And so everything from how we're actually looking at someone's resume or looking at someone's application, and then there's biases associated with that, everything from their name to their gender to the school that they went to where they grew up. All of that is basically making assumptions based off of that limited knowledge and a limited understanding. There was, in past experiences, there were certain schools that were considered better than other schools. And so if you went to that school, then yes, you got to the top of the deck because I had relations with that school. I went to that school. I understood that school. I gave value to that school. So that's a bias that I brought into the experience. And if I'm the only person that's basically making that judgment, then my bias is basically rule. So how does that play out in a workplace? How does that play out as far as diversity is concerned in the entire experience? If someone is coming through the front door and I'm the front door person or I'm greeting people and someone's coming through the front door and I'm looking at that person and I have some type of connection, some type of bias, some type of unconscious relationship with that person just based off of my mindset or my experiences, I'm gonna treat that person with a smile and how are you doing and everything like that. But then the next person comes through the door and I don't have, or my bias towards them is a negative connotation because of the way that they're dressed or because of the way that they remind me of someone else or whatever. That's going to affect how I interact and how they view not just me, but the organization that I'm with.
Yeah.
And so I've done that. I have taught classes where people have come through the door. I either knew them through past social media or I knew them through one experience or another experience that they came in a certain type of way that fit with my stereotype or my bias. And I treated them a certain way. It was very apparent after the fact, after I was told about the fact, but everyone, the other participants in the class or in the space didn't have that same relationship or that same experience because I was unconsciously gravitating towards this one person. And it was just like me, I didn't know it until I looked at the evaluations and I was just like, oh, okay. What can I do differently? Or why am I doing that? What does it actually look like? How does that go in this environment? And that's not very successful, one, for a work environment or a corporate environment, and especially not as a teaching environment.
Right.
So how do I evaluate that for myself and do better in the future?
Yeah, and you bring up such a great point when you were talking at the beginning about this idea of like resumes, or if you have current openings in your organization and you're going through and you're maybe honing in on certain backgrounds that you see for some people that maybe other people don't have. And, I think about that in terms of where we're at right now in the space of being the great resignation, right? Where we've lost what my last Gallup research said was 19 million people in the workforce since 2020. People are going to be re-entering the workforce now. And so for recruiters out there, for organizations, what suggestions or tips would you have for those folks to ensure that they're a little bit more aware of some of those implicit biases they may be in that process?
I mean, I think the easiest thing that we can do is diversify how you actually select candidates. And so if the resumes are coming in, or what does that actually look like? Let's step back. Let's look at the pool that we're actually are sharing that information to. And so we might be sharing that advertisement or that position based off of where we found success in the past. What gives us the biggest bang for the buck, or as the professional magazine. So let's just go ahead and do it that way. I'm not diversifying that pool that you might find that candidate that's not already connected, but still has the skills and the assets and the strengths to do the job. So let's diversify that. Let's look at our notice to see exactly, are we narrowing it down based off of the biases of previous people, or the person that was there before and they did all this and they were this type of person. Let's just write that into the scope so we can get another like this, and we're not open to the possibility that there's some other attributes that we actually bring. So then when the application comes in and the resume comes in, let's diversify it. Let's ask different people, not just 4 of Dwayne's, but let's ask different people that bring in different skill sets, different biases of their own, different upbringings, backgrounds as well, to have them look at it, because they're going to have a different viewpoint on certain things. And I've been in those panels where it's like, you like that meant blah, 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 blah to me. No, that didn't, Dwayne. Yes, it did. And that's all the biases. So then when you're doing that, explain your why. Explain why you chose this person, or why this actually affected you in a certain way. So often it's just like rank them and then send it in, but we're not doing the qualitative part. We're not having the conversation to discuss what were some of those triggers, what were some of those biases that we're talking about or discussing. One is going to open up your own viewpoint, but then you're also discussing yourself. It's like, oh, that is a bias towards me. I am skewed one way towards the other. So let me do a little bit different in the future. And then I say, once that person comes on board, have a conversation. I'm hesitant because I'm trying not to bring my own viewpoints in all this as well.
Sure.
But don't pigeonhole that person to say that they have to operate a certain type of way. There's different strengths that people bring to the conversation. So sometimes we have our own biases of how this person should operate. And if we don't, one, reflect on that for ourselves, and then let's just say, 2, have a conversation with that person, be like, all right, my bias is that you send me an email at 8:00 every Monday, whatever that might actually be. Let's just have that conversation so that other person understands what the environment might actually be. But be open, be diverse. It's hard for us to do that. I should say we. It's hard for me to do that at times, and it takes a lot of time to do that. But I strongly believe that the environment, the culture is a lot better if that environment is there, that one, we're speaking in biases, we're recognizing our biases, and then we're just taking the time to have the conversation about it right now, instead of when it escalates to the point that there's conflict that you can't have the conversation. Let's talk about it. And I said in my last few years, it's been a journey. I speak in biases now. My bias is, my limited viewpoint is, so that other person understands that when I'm having this conversation, I'm already speaking in the I that I don't know it all. I'm trying to know more, but I don't know it all. So I'm letting that person know that, one, I'm open to conversation. 2, I'm allowing them, if they feel comfortable, to speak in their own terms of biases, but then they can also correct me as well, because I'm only speaking of my limited viewpoint as well. So,
yeah, this is great stuff. I love that concept of being able to speak out of that, to say, these are my limiting beliefs. This is what I know. This is what I've experienced. This is where I'm coming from, is essentially what that is as well. But then I want to understand that viewpoint. And what's interesting to me is what I picked up on that there is when we're considering that kind of a talent acquisition process and really kind of diversifying, looking for some of those skill sets that maybe weren't what the person was before they got there, or the person that was before they had left. It could almost gain some momentum in this really trying to bring more awareness to our biases. It can also create some innovation, right? Because when we're bringing in people that have these skill sets that maybe weren't the original skill sets that you think were associated to that position, then goodness, the possibilities are endless. And that can just continue that momentum and create a culture now that would incorporate this a little bit more.
So yeah, I totally agree with you. And you saw me like holding back a little bit. I'm an engineer that's in an educational field.
Right.
And luckily, the people that were on the hiring committee basically did not hold that bias against me that engineers are a certain way, or they couldn't do this. And so, and I like to think that I'm successful. I like to think that I'm doing an okay job. So with that, I appreciate and applaud my bosses for doing that.
I think you're doing an exceptional job, Dwayne, and I'm so excited to have the opportunity to keep working with you. I want to check in with our folks here. I'm looking over here on my screen. All right. All right. Sorry, I'm going through them. There's a lot. You guys are so engaged today. Thank you all so much. All right. Sarah said she really likes the approach of saying my bias is. And having like vocalizing, being able to articulate it, and it becomes like common. Then it's something that once you've done it, research would say for, about 60 days, it becomes habit. It's not something you have to keep thinking about. You just continue to articulate that way.
And it's hard basically because you're being vulnerable a little bit. So it's not like I'm gonna do that to a complete stranger initially.
Right.
You do that with your close colleagues and friends, and then it just gets easier and easier as you do that work.
Yes, absolutely. And I'm kind of in the same boat as you when it comes to the background. I mentioned being a DJO, and I worked at the police department after that, and somehow I'm in this position now, and I think about that, and kudos to Ray and Dewey, who I think are on today in our chat. But I just want to just thank you and all the leaders out there that really kind of harness that kind of diversity, within their organization. What are some other tips that you might give for either being more aware of maybe some of these implicit biases we hold, and how to be more intentional moving forward?
So we talked about the conversation, having conversations either with friends, family members, colleagues, and just starting that dialogue. The other thing that I suggest is we talked about our biases based off of our story, based off of our experiences in education. So we can educate ourselves more. There's a lot of good information, trainings that are actually out there about biases, about cultural awareness, about diversity. So just start that conversation. Anything from a YouTube video or a TED Talk to actually going through trainings and educational series. Wherever your journey is, I would encourage us to all do that. Our lived experience. And so everything from looking at a different news station, looking at a different article on the web, doesn't say that you have to agree with it or believe it or accept it. It's just opening your idea to what others might actually believe, because you might encounter someone that's their news source. So at least understanding where other people might be coming from. And then as easy as your drive to work. I live in one part of St. Louis. I work in another part. So I live close in North County. I work more in Mid County. So I can easily just get on the highway, get on another highway and get here. Boom. But how much am I being exposed to neighborhoods, communities, people, environments that I only hear about on the news or only read about or I only hear from other sources? And so I'm using this secondhand information to basically judge how I'm viewing these communities, one that I'm working with, one that's neighbors and friends. And so just get off the highway and drive through a neighborhood or stop at a different store or go to a different coffee shop or walk down the street in a different space, just to expose yourself and have access to a different community, a different upbringing, a different lifestyle. And so not saying be late to work. I'm not telling you to do any of that. It's just basically doing the work to expose yourself to new opportunities, to new experiences, to new environments. And so it might be a friend that you might meet at a different place or a different coffee shop or a different restaurant, but just do the work. And it's going to get easier and easier as we go through this process, but do the work.
I love that. And what a unique strategy there. I never considered, we usually all are ingrained to just take the same path we've taken to work every day, but you're right. Taking something different that does expose you to those different things. That story I gave earlier, right? I'd never been exposed, 22-year-old kid, never been exposed to anything from what I knew. I believe it was Maya Angelou who said, do what you know until you know better.
Yeah,
And then when you know better, do
do
better,
better.
right? And I think that just putting some of these practical application elements in place is going to really get you that traction you want to keep moving forward. But I'd encourage our viewers out here to set your plan. All right. And when I say plan, I mean, consider the behaviors. And a lot of times we get confused about behaviors, but behaviors being things that you can see, things that you can hear, all right, that you're going to be actively doing to take a more intentional role and effort into understanding your own implicit biases, and then kind of moving forward from there. All right, starting to accept others. But any other thoughts kind of as we wrap up, Dwayne, on this particular topic?
I think you said it. I think that's a good wrap up right there. I think that was wonderful.
Well, I appreciate that. I'm looking over here. I'm looking to see if there's any other questions that we have in chat. Let's see. Oh, I'm hearing different things. Laura's saying, since our biases influence our fears, it can be very difficult for some people to let go and be open to new experiences. So we need to understand our others' fears. And I think that's a really interesting way to look at it too. Usually when we, the reason why we don't approach something, and this is kind of going back to us as adults, is kids. And I think of my 1-year-old, 1.5-year-old I have now at home, but he will explore everything. He will get into everything. He will talk to anybody. He will go anywhere. I mean, he has zero qualms in the whole world about just being him and doing life. And I love that. But as we age, it seems like those experiences that we've had, those limiting beliefs that we may have, are really shaping our comfort level with opening it up again. And that's got to be something we got to get over, right? But there is an element of fear. So understanding and accepting, all right, maybe trying to look into that a little bit more. Why am I fearful here? I mean, what do you say, Dwayne, when it comes to that? What would suggest?
I know, I totally agree. I mean, there are some of those fears that we actually have, and some of them are valid. And there are some places that, we shouldn't go or explore anything like that, but some of them are based off of limitations that either were told to us or basically we told to ourselves and live in that. And so I think the more that we actually talk about that, the more that we actually have allies and confidants that basically share a different side of the story, then that might, one, expose those fears for ourselves and say, what are they based on? Are they based off of truth, or are they based off of something that we just heard from someone, that someone, that someone, that someone? So I think more conversations, you develop allies that basically provide a different viewpoint that might actually expose you to that culture, expose you to that different area. And so the fear is a little bit less because you're not on this journey alone. It's hard for me to basically go in this pathway without people that are saying, one, you're going in the right direction. Two, think about this, work on that. And three, I'm here to support you when you fall. So even when I don't always speak in my biases, or I say something that's totally, totally wrong, I have people that are now around me that correct me. I mean, they don't scold me or anything like that. They're like, all right, Dwayne, let's have a conversation. Let's talk. And so all of that basically helps me, one, go a little bit in my in that fear direction, just because I know that I have people that are around me. I know that I'm on the right path. So it helps, and it's hard. I'm not saying it's easy. Yeah. None of this is easy. And once we have, you and I are having a great conversation. It's out there on, Facebook Live as well. But once we go outside of this element and we're having this conversation with someone that might not be as receptive, that's going to bring up those fears as well. So how do we internalize that? How do we work through that? How do we have that same confidence to continue to be on this path when we might get some resistance? We might get some, we've always done that. Don't try this. I don't care about your biases. Just do what I told you. You better never tell me that I have biases. All of that is stuff that we're going to face. But if we start facing that, and if we start facing that authentically, and even in small steps, I think that we're getting into a better environment especially in a better culture as far as our workplace is concerned, and then a better community and region as well. So it's not easy. We're here as you wanting to more have conversations and discussions. I'm all in the LinkedIn and everything like that. So if we want to continue to explore and talk about it and see how you can take that small step and what some of the fears that we can talk through, let's do it. Let's make it work.
You are the best, Dwayne. Thank you
Oh,
for this great conversation and for being so open to, continue it with all of our viewers too. And I will say, I went ahead and I dropped a link in the description here for your contact information through the MU Extension website. And then you all out there know how to get in touch with me as well, mti@missouri.edu. And I think we're going to keep this conversation flowing a little bit. So here in a couple more weeks, Ray and I will be back on. I believe it's Ray and I, or Dewey and I will be back on, and maybe we'll kind of debrief everything we've heard here. So if you guys have more questions, comments, suggestions, or thoughts, send those in to us. All right, same email, mti@missouri.edu. There's also a link in the description. But Dwayne, I just want to say thank you so much again for your time, for your expertise. Thanks for sharing it with us today.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so very much. It's been a pleasure.
Oh, you're too sweet. Well, I will reach out to you again after we close out here, but I'm going to go ahead and sign our meeting off. And everyone out there, I'm going to steal it from you, Ray. I'm going to say, go be great.
Take care.